Hi, and welcome to our continuing series of interviews with authors from the Canadian Journal of Science, Mathematics, and Technology Education. My name is Dr. Pamela Britton, and I'm a recent graduate from the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. I'm here once again representing the CJSMTE, which is one of the leading international journals in the fields of science, mathematics, and technology education, and strives to offer high quality, peer reviewed articles covering a variety of topics in the STEM education fields. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Ann Kajander from the Lakehead University Faculty of Education. Prior to her current role, she has taught mathematics at both the secondary and post-secondary levels, as well as working in industry. Dr. Kajander is here today to speak about her article entitled The Mandate of Scholarly Mathematics Education Research, Moving Ourselves Forward, and how we can change the situation that some people claim they can't do or don't like math. So, thank you very much, Dr. Kajander, for speaking with us today. I guess the first question is, can you tell me a little bit about the article?
Well, thank you. Yes, I think the article was really an attempt to encourage those of us in mathematics education to make a more concerted effort to do, frankly, a better job in promoting our field and our public image. I mean, let's face it, math class doesn't exactly have the best reputation. If you tell somebody at a cocktail party what it is that you do for a living, sometimes the body language speaks volumes. It's like, whoa, people hear the word math and it's like they kind of freeze up. And I think we as math educators, we have to take that on. I think it really is fundamentally our job to convey what it is that we do and what it is that could happen to make math class a better place. I think the media too sometimes is a little confused about who they should talk to. They hear the word math and they think, oh, well, perhaps we should talk to mathematicians. But I think what's important to know is that the field of mathematics and the field of math education are fundamentally different. One is about abstract ideas, one is about people. It's about human development and cognition. They're really quite different. And I think that we need to be more clear about what our role might be in sorting that out.
Excellent. Now, one of the things that comes up in your article is you speak about the fact, and you just mentioned that so many people claim they can't do or they don't like math. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Because it definitely is a very a common statement.
Sure. So, everybody has studied math to some extent. And so there's this sense that once you've studied math in school, you know about math education. The problem with that is, first of all, it's hard to generalize research based on a case study of one. And oftentimes those experiences are not recent. They're often, maybe depending on one's age, a few decades old. And so if you've had a poor experience in the past, perhaps a relatively narrow experience in terms of finding out what mathematics could really be, then of course that's going to color your view and your understanding of what might be possible. So for example, if the only math that you've ever experienced is math as a set of computational procedures, worse still, procedures that didn't really make a lot of sense to you at the time, then you're probably going to feel some level of discomfort with mathematics. Perhaps that's cumulative over a number of years. And computational procedures that don't make sense, they tend not to stick. People forget them. And so that adds to that feeling of sort of being uncomfortable. And yet, there's this feeling, well, that must be what math is, because that's the only kind of experience that I've ever had. So just to build on that a little bit, imagine that you're in school and that you were asked to answer a math question and that you came up with a solution to the question in a way that made sense to you. maybe there was a small computational error in the solution, or maybe the answer was even right. Now, if the only thing about your solution that is being valued or graded for marks is the answer, and your answer perhaps is incorrect, or worse still, your answer is actually correct, but the method you used perhaps wasn't the standard algorithm or the one that was, expected, then it's possible that your solution won't be valued and you'll actually be told as a student, well, that's not right. Or I've even literally seen things marked wrong where the reasoning was actually excellent. So now imagine what kind of feelings you're left with as a result of that experience, that kind of, you know, I thought I understood it, but I guess I don't, math seems really confusing. It seems to be about rules. I don't really know how they work. And now imagine you've had that experience over years and years and years. You can see how people's perceptions of themselves as well as of the subject are built up in that way.
Yeah, very, very much so. That makes a lot of sense. One of the things that so you in your kind of speech there, you were talking about discomfort and confusion with math, but I noticed one of the terms that you didn't use was math anxiety. And that's a very kind of common term right now. You've actually made the somewhat controversial claim that math anxiety doesn't exist. Can you kind of speak a little bit to that, provide a little bit of clarification on that?
Sure. I think what I don't like about the term anxiety is that it sounds like it's kind of this irrational fear that, that just needs to be soothed, kind of like a warm milk and cookies thing. And the problem is that I think math anxiety is not the problem. I believe it's a side effect of the problem. So if we're going to go around fixing side effects, it's a bit like putting a Band-Aid on an infected cut. We really need to get in there and clean it out and put a good antibiotic on it and, look after it. And that's probably a better way of having things heal. And I think there's a tendency to do that with this whole idea of people being afraid of math. We tend to sort of try to soothe them in terms of that fear. I think in the long run, there are much, much better ways. I'm going to use the example of working with pre-service teachers because that's what I've been doing for the last over 15 years. And we literally have data on over 1,000 pre-service elementary teachers in particular. And a lot of this data we have written about in the journal. And there's a very typical tendency for a large number of them. I'm going to say a third to two-thirds, depending on the level, come into their math education courses being very afraid of math, expressing that fear and discomfort. And in my experience, the very best way to begin to overcome that is to quite immediately give them an experience where they can see themselves as math learners differently. So an experience where suddenly a piece of mathematics, very small, even simple piece of mathematics that they thought that they never really understood, suddenly it makes complete sense to them. And there are many ways to do that. It can be through context, it can be through examples, it can be through visual representations, physical manipulatives that they get to talk about and reason with. Anything that encourages the idea of making sense as opposed to following the rules and the procedures. And suddenly, when they begin to go back to that idea of trusting their own reasoning, that very thing we kind of sometimes pull away from children erroneously or have done in the past, they begin to see that, oh, maybe I can understand mathematics and maybe it does make sense and maybe I could learn more about it. And suddenly everything changes, like the body language changes, their eyes open up. There's just this, oh, like you literally see them almost lifting up in their, in their whole projection of themselves. It's that powerful. And once you've had one or two of those experiences, you're more willing to take a chance. You're more willing to open yourself up and say, okay, well, I did it with that little example, so maybe I could do it with this. And that confidence begins to come back. And I truly believe that that is the best path, rather than just sort of saying, oh, really, it's not that bad. You shouldn't be anxious. So I think it's really in terms of what the intervention is, that is the most important thing we need to remember.
Excellent. Yes, and it's less about the algorithms, more about just building that understanding, building that confidence that I understand this, so I can do it. Yeah, that sounds excellent to me. um, so as I mentioned, that's kind of it's kind of can be a controversial viewpoint. So when you were writing this article and kind of putting these ideas out there, how did you feel about it? How did you think it was going to be perceived? Did you worry that it was even going to be accepted? Kind of what were the thoughts that way?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think I was a little bit nervous about suggesting that we need to be more proactive in terms of promoting what we do. I think it's fair to say that many good mathematics educators are happy doing their own work, but we're not necessarily comfortable speaking out publicly um, about our discipline and about what we do and about mathematics. It's not something we're trained to do, and many people aren't that comfortable. And also, I think that there is a tendency for the public certainly to have strong opinions about mathematics, as I discussed. And so in a sense, you're sort of putting yourself out there a little bit for criticism. Now, of course, the readership of the Canadian Journal of Science, Math, Technology and Education is is a relatively safe space, because many of the readers of this journal are interested in mathematics education and understand some of the ideas. But nevertheless, um, I think it's not something we're, as math educators, immediately comfortable with. On the other hand, I think in general, we do need to do a better job, as I was saying at the beginning, of promoting some of what the research says, some of the newer and better ways of helping kids to learn math, understand math, and feel better about math. Because when it comes right down to it, the curriculum implementation is going to be influenced by the public perception, the government perception, the teachers' perceptions of what mathematics is and what's important in math. So I think it has to become part of our role.
Wonderful, and that actually it lends very nicely into kind of my last question of what do you hope will come from this article? You mentioned, we need to change public perceptions, and math, education research really needs to kind of lend a hand in all of this. I guess, yeah, what do you hope will come from the article? Is kind of why did you write it from the perspective that you did? Was there something you were really hoping to get across with it?
Well, ultimately, I think that we in the field need to work together to promote the perception of mathematics more publicly, but also, very importantly, to support better learning of mathematics. So many real world issues are dependent on people having depth in their mathematical understanding, not necessarily have, learn more formulas or more technical skills, but to have an understanding of some of the kinds of thinking involved. So, for example, and this is brought so clearly to us in the last year and a bit, the pandemic is, and predictions around the pandemic is essentially a mathematics problem. Models of climate change are mathematics problems. And we've heard words flashed around in the media like exponential growth. Well, how many people really understand what exponential growth is and how is that different than linear growth? You don't necessarily need to know all of the procedures or algorithms or be able to proficiently substitute numbers into a formula, but you need to have a sense of what is different about these kinds of mathematical models and why some of these issues are so pressing in terms of the world, literally, and we've seen this very clearly in the last year or two, understanding some of these mathematical models in terms of their implications is literally important enough that it is necessary for human survival. I think it's that important.
I think that's a wonderful, message to put out there. And I know personally, I fully agree and support that as well. Well, thank you so much again, Dr. Kajander, for telling us more about your article. Um, if you'd like to dive a little deeper into these issues, we suggest you check out the second part of this video, where we will explore ways to support the development of mathematics confidence in a bit more detail and to provide some further insights and examples. Should you wish to read the article, which I highly recommend, on the mandate of scholarly mathematics education research, moving ourselves forward, you can find it in the CJSMTE online at springer.com/42330. I'm Pamela Britton, and from everyone here at the Canadian Journal of Science, Mathematics, and Technology Education, thank you for joining us today. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CJSMTE.